Though the Vietnam War began in 1954, many people blame the Vietnam War and North Vietnam's Tet Offensive as being the death of the 1960s. The hard-hitting facts of the war show how much it impacted Americans. Between 1965 and 1973, it is estimated that the United States had dropped 8 million tons of bombs on Vietnam. It also introduced a new type of chemical warfare and a new herbicide named Agent Orange. In 1969 alone, around 1,034,300 hectares of forest were destroyed. This clearly shows the long-lasting significance of the Vietnam War on the environment. The other significance is in the numbers. 2 million people died, 3 million were wounded, and approximately 700,000 Vietnam War veterans suffered from PTSD and other psychological problems. The Vietnam War also greatly impacted society and American life. The war was the first ever televised war. People could see live footage of soldiers and civilians being killed, tortured, and blown into pieces. This changed television and movies forever. Movies and video games are now very graphic. Vietnam anti-war protests were extremely prevalent on school campuses and created a movement that was anti-war and pro-peace. Vietnam veterans were extremely unappreciated when they returned home, and many saw America as losing the war. The significance of this is that it was one of the first times other countries began looking down on the United States and considering us an underdog. American citizens began to question the government, and people began to lose faith in America. The Watergate scandal occurred in the years 1973 to 1974. On June 17, 1972, several burglars were arrested inside the office of the Democratic National Committee. These burglars were connected to Richard Nixon, and it even gets out that Nixon tried to cover up the scandal by using hush money as a way to quiet the burglars. The Vietnam War caused a harsh political climate, and Nixon believed that the way to win presidency was to spy on the Democrats and learn about their election plans. Nixon wasn't impeached, but he was advised to resign from office.
I remember there were two reporters that broke into the Washington Hotel to spy on the Democratic National Convention, and I only really know that Nixon burned the tapes and lied about the whole situation. It was constantly on the news, and I thought they were going to impeach Nixon over it. I knew the politicians had secret dealings, but I didn't realize how corrupt the U.S. politicians were. I think people started to take more interest in what was happening with the elections and who was going to be elected president. I also think that it changed many people's views on Nixon's presidency, and the citizens began to realize how dishonest he was.
With containment still being America's #1 priority, Ronald Reagan worked diligently in creating a relationship with the USSR's new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. Gorbachev brought hope to the Soviet Union and introduced two new policies that granted political openness and economic reform. Soviet influence in Eastern Europe waged, and on November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall collapsed and West and East Germany were reunited for the first time in 15 years. This is an extremely monumental event, and it changed the lives of Germans forever. In 1989, every other communist state in the region replaced its government with the non-communist one. Waging Soviet influence also led to the Soviet Union falling apart in the beginning of 1990. This is a huge event for American history, and it is basically a win against communism. After this, America is the world's leading power. Nelson Mandela was freed after 27 years in prison in 1990. He negotiated the end of apartheid in South Africa and was the first black president. He brought peace to a racially divided country and influenced the fight for human rights around the world. Apartheid banned marriages between black and white South Africans and classified all South Africans by their race. It also forced blacks to leave their homes and live in racially segregated neighborhoods. In some cases, legislation split families apart. They believed the kids were white and the parents were black. Though 90% of the population was black, the 10% of whites ruled government and society and implemented laws that separated the two races. The United States and the UK both imposed economic sanctions on the country. Under a large amount of international pressure, the government began to make new reforms and even ended the ban on interracial marriage. In 1994, a new constitution was created which led to the enfranchisement of blacks and other races, allowing Nelson Mandela to win the 1994 election and end apartheid system forever. This is significant because Nelson Mandela influences many people to take a stand for equality, and he is even known as a champion of freedom. Nelson Mandela won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. The most significant event of the 2000s occurred on September 11, 2001, also known as 9/11. 19 militants associated with al-Qaeda hacked 4 planes and successfully flew 2 planes into the New York City's World Trade Centers and a third into the Pentagon and Washington, D.C. Over 3,000 people were killed in the attacks, including more than 400 police officers and firefighters. America immediately took action. This event helped show American pride and unite the people for one cause. People collected food, blankets, supplies, and donated blood to help victims. This event began the War on Terror and even showed long-term significance in homeland security and airport security. Prior to 9/11, airport security was rather relaxed. Now it is strict and prohibits any liquids being brought on the plane. This is an important event because it shows America for the first time that terrorism is an impending problem. 9/11 affected the lives of many, and almost every person that is old enough to remember it remembers seeing the two buildings fall, one after another, and feeling a wave of panic, emotion, and sadness fall over them. The war on terrorism may never be stopped, and 9/11 is an event that will be remembered forever in American history.